This final chapter that we'll cover in this class gets closest to the subject matter of the class, talking about an institutional culture, which in a culture and management class one would think would be the capstone thing to be discussing. The first concept covered is called institutionalism. Let me try that again. Institutionalization. And that's when an organization takes on a life of its own and develops its own personality. Okay? Its institutions going from just a random set of people to something where the organization starts to have a theme. Okay? Once you're past institutionalization, you get to organizational culture. Organizational culture refers to a system of shared meaning held by members that distinguishes the organization from other organizations. Okay? If this were people, we might call it a religion. It's a shared faith, a shared way of doing things. Okay? Now, what are the elements of an organizational culture? The first one is innovation and risk-taking. How tolerant are they? Is it the organization that's bent upon doing the same old thing over and over again, or is it an organization that tolerates new things? Google is an organization that tolerates a lot of new things. In fact, they give each of their employees 20% of their time to work on new things. 3M is actually the one that really began all of that, giving people time to work on their own projects. Okay? Second thing is attention to detail. How careful of every little thing is the organization? Toyota would be a good example of an organization with a high amount of attention to detail. They were actually so successful keeping track of all the details that they were able to invent something called oh my gosh, I've lost the name of it. Just-in-time supply management, which is where they don't carry inventory, or they carry very little inventory. What they need for whatever they're working on is supposed to be set up so that it arrives as close to when they actually need it as possible. And sometimes, well, that's where they get the name just-in-time. The stuff arrives just as it's being used. Okay. Next detail is outcome orientation. What that means is, are they worried about the outcome more or the technique to which the outcome came? Now, organizations that watch their technique, that watch how things are getting accomplished rather than whether it was accomplished, tend to succeed more in the long run. But where is that orientation? Are they short term? All that matters is success, or is it long term? What matters is that we did it the right way. Okay. The fourth element pointed out by the book is whether they're people orientations. Are they concerned more about successful people and taking care of their people, or are they, again, short term, only worrying about the outcome? Okay. Investing in people can be expensive and can take a long time, so it's not always the best way of accomplishing a healthy company if you need to be healthy now. If your company's in trouble, you probably maybe want to be more of a short term, more of a outcome based. But if you're building for the long term, if you have that luxury, then obviously, investing in the people and making sure you have the right people will be the way to go. Okay. Team orientation is the next element. Do people work in teams? They work on their own. When somebody's successful, do they get the credit? Does their team get the credit? How is the blame shared? How are the responsibilities divvied up? Is it hierarchical where everybody has a very specific boss and the success goes to that person and they are facilitating that person's success? Or are we seen as we're all fairly egalitarian, we're all just about the same amount of power, and we have shared success? How much do teams matter? Aggressiveness. Is it an organization that has to get what it wants now, or is it willing to wait longer if such an endeavor is going to pay off in the long term? How quick do they have to be? How, gets many risks, gets into the risk taking again. This will show up sometimes when they're creating management. How much are they willing to overpay to get the right people? How aggressive are they? Okay. And the final element pointed out is stability. How much is this organization going to be just like it was 5 years from now? In 5 years, is it going to? Is in 20 years? Because you walk in and know that you were still in the same organization. Obviously some people may have moved, but is the way of doing things the same? So stability, that's the next element of organizational culture. Okay. Now, in small corporations, small companies, one culture is probably about all that really exists. But in large ones, especially ones with thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of employees, you may see a dominant culture and subcultures, so that a certain division, a certain area of the company, a certain geographic area, may act differently than the corporation as a whole. And in some organizations, that's fine. That everybody needs to do what works for them, and they are allowed autonomy, and that works. In others, there's a push to avoid what's called drift, which is, where we all start on the same page, and then, 6 months later, Team X is off in their own. Another 6 months later, Team Y is doing something a little bit different. Okay, and that's drift, where we all kind of start on the same page but drift away from that page. Certain organizations tolerate that, some certain don't. Some subcultures are impossible to avoid. People are going to kind of do their own thing from time to time, but how much of that is allowed is definitely defined by management and what's allowed to take place. Okay, the core values. You can say what your core values. You can say what's most important, but what is actually going to be viewed and treasured as most important is going to be what you act upon. That you need to actively manage, actively think about what's the core value, what's the core belief and way of being of an organization. Okay, and you can kind of see by the way a corporation acts what its core values are. All right, strong culture versus a weak culture, and this is not what you may think about it. Strong culture is not necessarily better, and a weak culture is not necessarily worse. This is how much does the culture of the organization impact individuals' decisions. Okay, is a strong culture would be a corporation that everybody is definitely singing from the same songbook. Everybody knows what's expected, and that the culture is really defining the way people act. A weak one is one where people do more of their own thing. There's not one common theme and one common way of doing business. If the culture is good and productive, a strong culture is going to be better. But if the culture is poisonous and really not too helpful, then hopefully there's a weak culture. But strong versus weak, how much does that culture affect the day-to-day activities of people? Okay, what does a culture do? What are the functions of a culture? Well, the first thing it does according to the book is define boundaries of the organization. Okay, what do we do? What do we sell? Where do we sell it? Okay, the culture is going to help determine that insofar as are we a woodworking business? Are we in the business of producing the wood, cutting down the wood? Are we a business that sees itself as expanding into every role we can? Or are we a business that knows who we are and just tries to be what we are? Are we trying to expand vertically? Are we trying to expand horizontally? The culture's knowledge of who it is. A good example of a culture that finds its identity in that future exploration is, again, to go back to Google, where they've had many different products. They've gotten in from search engines into phones and YouTube. Now they're trying to do driverless cars. Expanding what they're doing is part of their culture. Whereas other corporations try to define what they are very narrowly. They try to be what they can be in a sentence. Okay. Second thing it does is conveys a sense of identity for the members of the organization. It helps people understand who we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. Okay. The Marines is a good example of this. That they go in first. Okay. That is their identity, and anybody who joins them, anybody who's a part of them, understands that. Okay. A culture helps people to commit to a goal larger than themselves. When people get the sense of what this culture is all about, what we do is all about, they are more willing to get involved with something that may put themselves in personal risk. And then that's whether the bigger than themselves gets into. Finally, a function of a culture enhances the stability of a social system. It's that glue. We all know who we are. We all know what we're trying to accomplish. We all know what our corporation does. And so we work towards that. It gives us something, a commonality, something to work together towards. Okay? It's important to remember that culture can be a liability. Okay? It can be a barrier to change. How can it be a barrier to change? Well, if we've always been a company that just makes sandwiches, Subway say, then there may be blowback when we try to do breakfast as well, or if we were to try to expand to do pizzas. We're defined by our sandwich making ability, and trying to do something different, trying to make something at a different time of day or a different product might be frightening. It can be a barrier to diversity. If we've always hired the best people from the University of Alaska Southeast or University of Alaska Fairbanks, if we've just always hired those people, we may not even look other places. We may just say, hey, this is who we are. If we maybe we've always hired people from a certain town or a certain religion or a certain ethnicity, and we may not begin to not even look. And other people outside of that group may think, oh, they'll never hire me. I'm not this ethnicity or this religion or this from this town or whatever. Okay. Barrier to acquisition. Okay. Management may want to buy something, but there may be blowback from shareholders or the board or employees about adding people who don't get it, who aren't part of their way of doing things. And because they don't do business the way we do business, we shouldn't add them, and all of a sudden there's resistance to adding and buying a company that may really help us to succeed. So, okay. How do you start a culture? First of all, the culture is defined by the founders, the people who were there first, the people who created the business. Both because, A, they're there first, that should be obvious, but also people look to them. People look to the bosses, people look to the ones with the big ideas to get it going, as role models, as inspirations, almost a father or mother figure, depending on the gender of the person. People want to believe in something bigger. People want to believe that they're working for something great, and so they'll look to those original people to help them to be part of that. Okay, they'll look to how do they manage? What vision do they communicate? What words do they say about the vision? Who do they hire? When do they do things? All of these things that people may not think of as, oh, I'm putting in a culture here, is exactly what the people who are watching it, maybe the people who are working for you, are looking towards to see what is acceptable, what are we doing. Okay? If you want to start a culture, top management must be involved. Top management must be helping to spread it, must be backing it up, because again, it's that father-mother figure. It's that thing where people will look to those people for the leadership to understand what it is that this corporation's doing. Okay, we're going to move into a different topic here, and I see I'm getting close to 15 minutes, which is my limit for posting. So I'm going to end here and do one more.